Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Artist Forge Live. My name is Nicole York. I will be your host, and today with me is the wonderful, the
Hello.
talented Bassam Saba. Hi,
Hey,
Bassam.
how are you? It's been a while.
I know you've been
Missed you
super
guys.
busy, I feel like, with
I've
work
had
stuff.
actually, I have been. Yeah, it is actually good stuff. I've had a few shoots more than usual over the last couple of months, and somehow they end up being on a Monday,
Ah,
uh, which is fine. It's a good reason, good excuse. But I do miss you, and I do listen to the shows, and yeah, looking forward to it. Where are our friends?
who knows today? I
Yeah.
think today is one of those everybody's a little bit behind because it's daylight savings time. And also, yeah, and also with everybody at WPPI, I think last week there
Yeah.
was, I think probably everybody is recovering, but that's okay.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's fine.
That'll be
It
all right.
just puts me under more performance anxiety than usual.
Which you should even be better because there's just nobody around.
I,
So
I guess that's one way of looking at it. But you know what's interesting is that whenever I can't be there, you guys end up talking about stuff that I could really contribute to, and I'd be listening in the car after, and it's almost like I'm gonna jump in, and I forget that it's actually being taped. It's taped this from 2 days ago or whatever.
ah
So yeah, the last couple of times we got together, it was very interesting stuff. Talking about just the year, the beginning of the year, and the little blah mood that everybody's in, and how to deal with that. That was quite interesting.
Yeah, I thought I feel like there's been some really good episodes, and it's a bummer that we're in such a weird transitional place right now with everybody because then there's not as much like continuity, I feel
Right.
like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it'll
But
get better, I think.
our friends know us, and we are where we are. And here's Dennis. Nice to see Dennis again.
Yes, hi Dennis.
And I'm excited that you announced his um it's April 13th. Uh,
Yes. Yeah, and we're just about a month out, so I'm going to
yeah.
start putting together all the promo stuff soon because I didn't want to start too early and then people would kind of get used to seeing it and not pay attention anymore. So we'll be putting that out soon, and hopefully a lot of folks will come and join because, like, if you're going to learn from somebody,
Yeah.
might as well learn from the master, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
if you
Yeah.
are hanging out with us in the audience today, please go ahead and say hi. We'd love to talk to you guys. And today, I think we'll probably start a conversation that I imagine is we'll continue on. I'm guessing for probably a couple of episodes, but today we're going to actually be talking about the performance aspect of being an artist, and being a I don't want to say a commercial artist, but I mean that's essentially what you are if you're selling your work, right?
Right.
Rather than a hobbyist. But
Exactly.
so the performance aspect of that, and I think as now this has always been a thing, but I think as we've begun to have more access to each other, as media has grown and our access to media has grown, it has become, I think, even more important than it ever was in the past, when you might have been able to rely on something like a sponsor or a patron or other people to kind of prop your work up and show
Right.
you off.
Yeah.
And now that performative aspect is, I think, even more crucial than it used to be. And yet it makes most of us really uncomfortable. So I think it would be interesting to chat about that a little bit and get people's experiences if they feel like showing your work off and presenting your work and showing whether you do that with like behind the scenes or you do interviews or whatever, there's always some kind of performative aspect to the process.
Right.
And I'm really curious to know how people feel about that, because I think it can be one of the most powerful things we do, but it's also one of the most difficult and uncomfortable for so many artists that are introverted or who don't feel either confident enough to allow a large amount of people to see that, or maybe just feel like they're not good at it. So from
Yeah, I
your
think with the
perspective,
fourth one there, you talked about it's being either introverts or what did you say? So what was the second thing you said? Anyways, you mentioned a few things, but there's one aspect of it. I mean, I don't fit in any of those categories because I'm not an introvert. I can actually do it. I'm competent at it if I want to do it. And I can't remember the third thing you said, but in my case, it's I don't connect with that showmanship aspect of it, and sometimes I see it as showmanship. It's almost you're putting on a performance, and to me, it's all about authenticity and integrity. And I can't see myself doing it with authenticity, right, outside of the actual process of creating a photo shoot with somebody, where I definitely put on performance, but that's what I do, and it's one-on-one, and that's where my strength is. I've always been a low-key kind of guy. I'm not the type that stands out in the crowd and walks into a room and everybody kind of feels their presence and so on. So I struggle with it, not because of the things you mentioned, but more because I just don't feel I'm authentic when I do that. And I look around and I look at people, and I totally understand the importance of it and the impact it has on people's businesses. And sometimes I wonder, is that really a block for me? Is that what's holding me back? Right? Because it seems that everybody's doing it, but I know not everybody's doing it. And a lot of successful people are not doing it in terms of that online out there presence in terms of performance. I'm not talking about performance as an artist when you're doing your thing. You're muted.
Thank you. Yeah. I was trying to pull up our little things. I was like copying links and getting them so people would come and join us, and then I got completely lost in my mutedness. Yeah, no, I think what you said is something that a lot of other artists will also connect with, because most of us do not get into this field in order to be showmen, right? Like we don't get into this field to perform for other people unless we're in the performing arts. But outside of the performing arts, most of what we do is very deeply personal. We do this for ourselves, and then we hope other people will connect with it. And sometimes we maybe work with one or two other people, but there's only a few fields that are like highly collaborative. And so for the rest of us, when we do this, the idea of inviting other people in or having to perform a certain way for their gratification so that they can then be interested in our work isn't the reason that we've done that. And I wonder if you think, Bassam, that this has become more important over the last 15 or so years, because I feel like the performative aspect of it has become almost as important as the art itself to getting and making public sales.
Yeah, I mean, we've often talked about how you market yourself and how things change through the times. And in the old days where you used to kind of send a portfolio or kind of knock on doors and show your portfolio, I mean, you could say back then that those things were really important. And so you're absolutely right. In today's world, that's what it takes. That's what marketing is about. That's where people are. That's where people are expected to be. That's where people are looking for things, right? So absolutely right in terms of being extremely important to what we do. But like everything else, not everybody needs to do it. And a lot of successful people, whatever the definition of success, are not doing it. To me, it's a source of frustration, because I know it will be something that would help my business. I keep resisting it like the plague. And I'm stuck in that zone. And how much of my, I guess, what I call, if I'm getting stagnant in my business, how much of that is really because of that? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
That's a good question. Do you think that you resist it? I mean, obviously, in part because this is not a thing. Like we signed up to be artists and business people and not necessarily marketers or performers, right?
Right.
But do you think you resist it at all because it's kind of like an imposition? Like it feels almost as if there's this weight of expectation, like other people deserve to get this from you if you want their business. And I don't know, in a way, it can feel like grasping a little bit, like people are saying, and I guess I shouldn't say it's people, but the system, right? Like the system is built around capturing attention and maintaining attention, pressure. which requires entertainment value on some level.
Exactly. And yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's where I'm it's just not me. I can't, I look at Matt, and Matt is he would probably say he's like me, but he's actually the opposite of me, right? So I look at his videos, very simple videos that he does for his business, right? And I put myself in his shoes and I say, if that were me doing it, right, I would probably do 150 takes and still hate every aspect of it when I look at it. That's why I don't do it.
Yeah.
Right? Because I just know myself. Right? So it's not as much the pressure as it is that avoidance. Right?
Sure. Makes sense. I mean, I think that there's definitely room within our field in general to do or to choose the thing that works best for us and then try to maximize that. And I think recently, and I know we actually talked about this before, but recently somebody said that if you're not going to expand, you have to, a word that I just lost. It's where you make everything, you have to become more efficient. And that's a word that I just forgot.
Right.
But essentially, if you're not going to maximize, you have to hyper focus and make everything as efficient and clean, and it needs to run as well and be as effective as possible. So that if you do want to expand, you can either do it wide, right? So by reaching more people, or you can do it upward by having every system flow beautifully and be as maximized and as profitable as possible to make up for the difference in volume that other people might get. And I wonder if that is more of an option for folks who don't want to add this performative aspect to their art business.
Yeah, I mean, it is in terms of how you grow your business and make it more impactful for you and for others. But from a marketing perspective, I don't know if that compensates for that.
So then let me ask you this question. So we talked about customer service many, many times. And one of the kind of main aspects we always cover is making the entire customer journey as seamless, as comfortable, as easy to navigate. And then by the time they're working with us, we want that experience to be stellar, right? Yeah, epic. And so that by the time they leave, we have treated them so well, and we've just maximized, like we give them everything and the highest quality of the things that we can, and just blown it out of the water, so that when they leave us, they then become part of our marketing schema, even without us actively, what we could say, marketing, right? So could you see maybe that as a marketing tactic that doesn't maybe necessarily require that wide?
That's exactly what it is. But that does not require that inauthentic or unauthentic performance that we were talking about. That really is my flow. That's my work. That's what I do. That's where I'm at my best. Therefore, to me, it's not a performance. Although I may, to others, it may look like a performance, but I'm in my element and I'm comfortable with that. I'm an authentic. So that performance aspect of it breeds fans, breeds people that are going to be talking about me and recommend me to others and so on. But again, I like to put things in bucket. I just can't mix those two buckets, right? All I'm saying is that I can see myself growing my business without doing that, right?
Sure.
With different avenues, right? But they won't compensate for the performance in terms of, I guess, the common way of getting business nowadays. That pressure of being online, that pressure of being out there, which, if you look at what I've done in the last, I haven't posted anything since November. Maybe one post. I haven't done a video that I put online in a long time, although I'm producing stuff and I have stuff and I have a whole backlog of stuff I can be posting and showing off and behind the scenes stuff. I'm just not doing it. And yet my business is not, I wouldn't say is growing, but it's not suffering. I'm actually not losing business. I'm getting more business. But I think it's more volume breeds volume also, just.
Right. Do you think the things that you were doing before, posting and all the things like that, do you think that helped get you to a point where you didn't have to keep posting?
Absolutely. That's why I believe it is necessary in today's world. It is probably, I don't want to say the easiest way, but the most default way to get things done. Right. Right?
Yeah.
It just, so absolutely. I'm not arguing against it. I'm just saying I'm comfortable with, what you defined up front as the performance aspect of what we do.
For sure. Yeah. And I've noticed, so that the fact that it feels like such a necessity, I think is, and if you're watching this and you've been around me for any time, you know that I have an issue when people make something seem like it's a necessity, like you have to do this or they want you to do this. I just immediately don't want to. Like Facebook is like, tell somebody happy birthday. And I'm like, no, I'm going to make them suffer just because you want me to do it. And I don't want to. I guess that's the closest I get to being a Gen Xer is not wanting to do whatever people tell me I should. But I feel like the pressure to do that, knowing how many people do it successfully and how positively it impacts their business and their sales and all of that kind of stuff, does make it feel like if you don't do the thing, you won't be successful. And there isn't really anybody out there. I mean, almost every video you see is talking about how to get bigger views, how to go viral, how to, kick the algorithm's butt, like all of these different things on almost any platform. And almost nobody is saying, like, if you don't want to be here, here are the things that you can do to still grow your business and be profitable and, all of that kind of stuff. And I do wish we would see that more, because it does feel like either you are the closeted artist in the woods and nobody ever sees your face, and once a year you have these big releases and everybody goes, oh my God, or you're a mini celebrity in your own right, constantly trying to perform. And it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of in between there, or like that spectrum seems incredibly tight to me.
Yeah. No, you're right. There isn't much in between. And we're looking at, I mean, that's what we're looking at all day long. How many of us are actually looking at those artists that are not doing that? Are we going to invest? Are we going to look into?
Because and they're not showing up online to tell us how to do it, right?
Exactly. So we have no comparison, right? Although most of us are doing some aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Right? That's true.
I'm sure anybody who's out there putting on a performance, they're doing all the right things and the other things in the background also, right?
Yeah.
If they have a good business, a lot of people, their business is that performance, is that online presence, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I can also say that part of me wants to be that too, right? Like I can't hide it. I'd like to be able to. It's not that I'm resisting it because I don't think it's authentic for me to do it, but I'm totally open for somebody else helping me with it. I'm actively searching for somebody to help me with it and do it on my behalf and so on, and offload that aspect of it. So it's more about me being I don't know how to describe it. To me, there's a difference when I'm just a contributor to it as the face of it. That's the only way I can think of it.
Sure. Do you think some of that comes from the kind of collaborative nature of your career before you became a photographer as well?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that earlier as you were speaking. It is my whole career has been like that, right? I've been known for not being the guy that stands out. That's I'm a fundamental kind of guy. I work in the background. I put all the right things in place. I work with people. I bring people together. The results are there, but they're not, like written on a big billboard outside and flashing billboard on Times Square. Look what we did today.
Yeah.
Where I found most of my colleagues, holding the similar positions, that was their approach, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
And as a matter of fact, I would say some of these, most of the time, that type of individual will probably go higher up in the organization than my type of than I would.
Right. So. Right. There's something I want to ask you then, and I'll give you this example because somebody did this to me recently and it kind of took me back a little bit. I was sharing, I think it was the book cover of my next book. I was sharing that on social media, and I was, as has been my habit over working with teams and models as a photographer for years and years and years, not only do I like to hype up my team to everybody who will listen and talk about how amazing they are and how skilled they are and how the work that I do would not be a tenth as good as it is if it was not for these folks. And so I was kind of doing the same thing with my cover artists and the people that I worked with to make this book a reality, and just talking about how amazing they are and how this work is going to be better because I was lucky enough to work with them. And somebody said, yes, and we love seeing that, but we also care about the work you did, and it's okay for you to be proud of it publicly. And it really struck me because I was like, wow, if somebody comments on a picture, on a photo that I took or something like that, and they say, this is so great, my default response is to say, I know, isn't insert X model, isn't she wonderful? Isn't this stylist talented? Isn't my makeup artist amazing? Like, that's my default when somebody says you did a good job, even though I want that affirmation, like, I'm not going to lie. But my default is to respond with, I know, look at all the amazing people around me. And I think we have this weird contradiction where we want people to be public so we can see them and feel like we know them and engage with them. And we want to consume their work, but we don't want them to be proud or too confident. We don't want any appearance, any potential appearance of arrogance. Otherwise, we're like, ew, you know?
Yeah.
So it's weird because it's like these two competing expectations where we kind of have to fulfill both. We have to be public enough for people to know that we exist and want our things, but we can't really be proud of ourselves or show up and say, I am really good at this and I did a good job. And I'm not, you know, afraid to say that.
Yeah. And I'm like you in many ways. In that respect, I'm like you. That's my default reaction to things. I guess you could call it being humble in a way and not giving yourself enough credit. And people want you to give yourself credit. They want you to just say thank you sometimes instead of just pushing it off to somebody else. And, you know, so I'm learning to say thank you more, but I feel awkward saying it. I really do. It's as if I've accepted their compliment.
Like you agree with it, right? Like, yes, right. I am great.
And that's not right. So just saying thank you is just, it's too much. Although it's safe, I guess, but it bothers me. It really bothered me to say thank you because I'm accepting the fact that I'm a show off in a way, you know. It's like
it's so crazy that we have that. So I had this conversation not too long ago because somebody was talking about imposter syndrome, and I know for so many artists this is like a deep thing that very many of us struggle with. I don't have this. I don't have imposter syndrome, which because mine is probably in the unfortunate and opposite direction. I do believe I'm good at things. I believe that I'm good at the things that I do, particularly if I'm doing them for money. I believe that I am good at them. And of course, my belief may be misplaced. That could entirely be true. However, I believe that I'm good at them. And when I am making art, I believe that I am standing in my place of power. And when I am speaking to people, whether that's public speaking or personal speaking, I also believe that I'm in my place of power. So I don't feel like I am an imposter when I do that. However, as soon as somebody comments on it, or as soon as somebody says, you're so good at this, I'm like, nah. But I realized that when I do that, as somebody who has put myself forth into a public spaces with some kind of a platform, even if it's not very large, anytime somebody sees me turn down a compliment or divert a compliment or anything like that, I am teaching them as well that they should not be confident and proud of themselves. In a way, I'm taking permission away from them to feel good about what they did, to feel good about what they did publicly, right? And if we remember when we were little kids and we drew something and we took it to our parents, nobody could tell us we were not the next Da Vinci, right? We showed our picture to everybody and we wanted to hang it on the wall and put it on the fridge, and we told our grandma, and we were so proud of that. And I feel like having to be humble, having to be publicly humble, also means that we're removing a little bit of that joy that we have from, it's almost like we're stealing secondhand joy. So I know that might sound crazy, but like I put a picture out and I say, I made this photograph, and everybody says, oh, you did such a good job. And then I push off the praise a little bit and I compliment my team and I'm like, tell my team they're great, but I'm still I'm sucking off that praise, right? I'm like, yes, okay, I did a good job. Thank you so much. But I don't want to be publicly seen accepting that praise because that's arrogant and that's vain or that's conceited or all of these things we're told we definitely need to be careful not to be. But yet it steals some of the joy away too. Like the whole purpose of making art is to share it with people. Why do we feel like we can't enjoy that in its entirety? And when we do enjoy it publicly, we are giving other people permission to be able to do the same thing too. So I guess it just makes me want to ask you this question. Like, do you think if you were able to accept those compliments publicly, you could do it under the belief that you were giving other people who were watching you permission to be able to do that for themselves too?
I'm not sure if I can answer that question first because I'm still stuck on something you said, and I was going to ask you a question before, and we'll get back to that.
Okay.
When people compliment you, and then you go into your default reply of, well, it's so and so, and they're such great makeup artists, and so on and so forth. And they tell you that, hey, but you deserve credit also. Do you see that as validation? Do you get this? Does that get you excited that they're actually doing that? You think
Mm,
part of what we do is actually to get that second validation?
So I think what happens is first, well, when this happened to me, first it shocked me because I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was doing that so visibly. Like, I didn't realize people could see me
Yeah.
deferring that praise. But I think what happens is you might be right there that when we do push it off, but somebody says, no, you're taking this, that is them giving us permission to accept it. It's
That's
almost
I didn't
like,
want to answer that question. It's the other way.
yeah,
It's the other way around, I believe, the permission. Because on the permission question that you had, it's more about, the way we are, at least I'm looking back to my business career, is I believe the way I am made me stand out more than those that tried to stand out.
mm,
Right? People appreciated me more as a leader because of the way I was. So I don't know if it gave them a permission to be that way, but in a way, it's not a matter of permission. It's maybe I'm somebody they'd like to emulate, or somebody to kind of say, hey, that's how I would like to be as a leader, and so on.
sure.
That's the way I saw it when I was in business, and looking back, it's not. I don't know if it's about giving them permission. I think it is the other way around, where it gave me permission to accept it in a different way.
Sure. That makes sense. I think what made me think of this is having seen so many artists, of course, over the course of the Artist Forge, and then being part of the artistic community, and then, of course, being online in other spaces, artists almost always hesitant to share, afraid of rejection, feeling like an imposter, like all of the difficulties that come along with a career in the arts. I'm talking about the internal difficulties, right? And I wonder sometimes how much of that comes from the public pressure of not being conceited, not being vain, not putting yourself forward, not being the one to stand up and say, it's me, I did it, I'm good, look at me because I'm worth seeing.
It's one of our blocks. I mean, we always talk about what are your blocks, and that's one of our blocks. I mean, obviously,
Right.
if we didn't care about that, or it wasn't too much of a burden for us to carry that, we would be doing these things. So somebody can actually do it with their eyes closed, and here we are struggling and trying to think of, like, how am I going to avoid that? Of course.
Right. And that makes me wonder if we were to challenge ourselves to be a little bit more comfortable with that, to be okay with saying, no, I did a good job. I wonder how much that, especially those of us who have any kind of platform, I wonder how much that would affirm the people who have learned secondhand this avoidance, and give them an example or give them permission to say, no, it's okay for me to stand up and say, I'm good at this. You know what I mean?
But that assumes that they would have to know the before and after. They would have to know us, right?
I don't know. I mean,
Because otherwise, we'd be just like everybody else out there that's putting themselves out there. So are they giving them permission already? Like, why would we, by changing our ways, give them more powerful permission than somebody who's already doing it?
I think it might have to do with how much people connect to you individually,
Right. So they must know you already.
like,
Yeah.
well, I mean, so I think that somebody might be able to look at you and say, like, here's a kind of a person I respect. And when he says things, I listen. For whatever reason, who you are makes sense to them. And so the way that you explain things, or, your personality
Right.
type is just something they can connect to. And maybe they look at somebody like Von Wong and they're like, that's amazing, but I can't see myself represented in him.
That's a good
And
example.
then,
That's a good, yeah.
right. And then they look at you and they say, but this is somebody I can connect to. And so when they see you do or say those things, it's a kind of implied permission that it's okay for them to be able to do that as well.
I'm struggling with trying to answer that question, because they see me for who I am, and that's what they appreciate about me. So if I change my ways, will they still appreciate me? I don't, will it be giving them permission, or will they simply appreciate me less?
So do you feel then that there is an inherent falsehood in the performative
it's because
side?
I talked about being authentic. I don't feel authentic being that way. I feel fake.
Right. But you say, I don't feel authentic being that way. But is that because you believe that there is inauthenticity in performance?
Yes. Well, I don't know if there's an inauthenticity in the performance, or I'm afraid of their perception that there is. Right?
Ah,
I'm pretty sure they're going to say that was freaking awesome, because that's what most of the work that I do, that's the feedback I get, as much as I don't like it and hate it and so on. But so it's the fear of getting, I don't want to have that feeling of I just looked fake in front of somebody. Right?
right.
We avoid feelings, right? In life, that's what we do. We're trying to
We're
avoid certain
trying to
feelings
avoid
and
feelings.
get others, right? That's all we do all day long, is try to get the right feeling and avoid the wrong one.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Like I've always said on this, I will do anything not to look cheap.
Mm,
Anything. I mean, I get triggered so fast when any discussion around being cheap comes my way, because
right.
I don't want to look cheap. So maybe I overdo it sometimes, and my wife
Oh,
is
that's
always
so
giving me hell for
interesting.
it. But yeah, it's avoiding that feeling of somebody perceiving you for an aspect of a person or a personality that you don't like, that you don't connect with, that you don't
Sure.
want to be.
So, here's an interesting thing about me. I am nearly unembarrassable. Like, there is almost not a thing that could happen that would
Yeah,
embarrass me. My favorite example of this, you're going to get a kick out of this one. I peed my pants one time in public. I was walking to the store. I don't know what happened for whatever reason. I was pretty young at the time, but I had to pee really, really bad. And I'm there's no bathrooms. I'm walking through town,
yeah,
and I tried to make it to my aunt's house. I ended up peeing my own pants. When I made it home, I didn't hide in the closet. I didn't run for cover. I died laughing. Like, I just lost my mind. I was
yeah,
laughing so hard because what a ridiculous thing to happen to somebody. And I think the reason, number one, sometimes I'll say I'm not as embarrassable because I have no pride. Like, it doesn't hurt my feelings to be human and to make human mistakes. But also, I think because almost my entire life, I've discovered that the more human you're willing to allow yourself to be in front of other people, the more permission you give them to connect to you instead of to a very neatly curated version of
exactly,
yourself.
exactly.
Yeah. And so, like, there's not much that would make me feel shame, even in front of other people. Um, and I wonder if that also kind of plays into this idea of performance, of this idea that if we are going to let people see us, we can't let them see the bad stuff, right? Because that brings in all of those negative feelings of like, that's not who I want to be.
Right.
That's not who I want to be seen as, instead of like, here's me and all my messiness, and yet I'm still doing the thing, which means that if you're a complete mess, you can still do the
Exactly,
thing.
exactly. I mean, I was going to ask you that question. How do you feel about your performance in because lately you've been very focused on putting yourself out there, right?
Yep.
Extremely focused around your books, and I see that, and I think a lot of people are seeing it. How do you feel about that? Do you find yourself at home? Are you in your
So
comfort zone, or are you what? Yeah,
yeah, so I think when I first started doing that, so I've been on Facebook for a bazillion years, just like
yeah,
everybody else has. And there is a level of disassociative comfort with Facebook because it's mostly text and then sometimes pictures, right? With something like TikTok, it is much more incredibly personal and immediate because your face is there and your tone of voice is there. And
it's
so
more of a performance, right? Yeah,
well, I think that that's the mistake of it is when I first started, I was trying to do things that would be good or make people want to follow me. And then I realized about partway through that that was not working for one thing. Um, and so the more I tried to just show up as myself and not very nicely try to say things that were very informative and could help people learn things
right.
so that they could,
Yeah,
and the more I just became what like the mess of showing up and being who you are without being hyper perfect or without worrying about every word or whatever. And of course, as with anything, it has to sit in a middle ground because you do need to do things like edit for clarity and make sure that you're not wasted because you only have so much time.
right.
So there certainly is a curated aspect of it. But I think the more I show up with the intention to be as much myself as possible. Like there's a video this morning of me and the curlers that I used to do this to my hair because I had something to say and I didn't want to forget it. So I did it really quickly, even though I had these pink things sticking out of my head. And some people may see that and be like, ugh, and scroll on by. But those aren't my kind of people. The people who saw that and were like, hey, I look like that sometimes too, and connected with that, then they're more connecting with me. And at that point, I feel like I can't lose. Because if you don't like me for my honesty and for my vulnerability, then I don't want you around anyway. And if you do, then that just means we'll probably form a deeper, more honest connection faster.
Exactly. And people are looking for connections. They're not looking for books. There's tons of books out there. There's tons of pictures out there. There's tons of photographers. They're looking for that connection. And the type of work you do and the type of work I do, it's all about the connecting with the person.
For sure.
Right. And it's I guess I've got to give myself permission to be who I am without being too curated. Right. And I suck at curating myself. That's the part I'm not very good in the moment in terms of curating what I say, how I say it. One aspect of it, and I'm not using it as an excuse, but I often think about that, is I speak 3 languages, but I'm because I speak 3 languages, I'm not very articulate in all 3, if you know what I mean, right? It's almost like I've suffered on being articulate by actually speaking 3 languages. So I don't know if it's a thing or not, right? But I do struggle with that, right? So on the spot, in the moment, unless I'm totally familiar with the subject, right? So to talk about photography, I can talk about photography forever, but to actually, make a video about it where I have to actually curate the message and the 5 points and the this and the that and the other, I struggle with vocabulary. I struggle with the right, putting the right, I lose words. I'm at a loss for words often. So I think that plays into it. Why I avoid it? It's because I don't find I have that skill set.
And it's not a skill set that you want to invest time in because that is precious and you have other places you want to spend it.
Well, because I'm also at a point in my, if I was a 30, it's not about age as much as where I am in my career right now. So if I was an early 35-year-old, 30-year-old photographer trying to build a business for the next 25 years, I may see the need to invest into something like that. Where I am right now, the past, the reason I said that your last couple of calls or last couple of get-togethers, I was really enjoying the topic you were talking, because I'm at a stage where I've, over the last 3-4 months, for some reason, I've given myself permission to accept where I am, and I don't really need that pressure of being like everybody else and listening to that podcast, that person on that podcast, and what so and so is doing, and what Sue Bryce Education's telling me, and what the other I've kind of let go over the last 3-4 months of all of that, right? To simply say that I'm fine where I am. I don't need to impress anybody else. I don't need to learn from any. Yes, obviously I need to learn, but you know what I mean, right? Right. So to me, yeah, you're right. Do I want to invest in that skill? If I had a good reason, I will, and I know I will. Right? Do I have a good enough reason right now? Probably not.
You know what, as you were mentioning, not feeling as facile with languages as what you feel like you should, so that you can speak in a way that you feel confident, you communicated well. And I just thought, like 15 minutes ago, I completely forgot a word and was like, I don't know what the word is, but it's this kind of stuff. Let's continue.
That's right. But the way you dealt with it is so, and it's just you. I mean, it's okay. Whereas if I lose a word, I feel like a moron.
That's kind of what I was going to ask is, it makes me wonder what happened or how that belief system got attached at some point to this idea. My son is like this too. He's one of those people who feels like he needs to speak very well off the bat. And so as he's speaking, he's actually curating himself. Yeah. And if he feels like he's not communicating well, he'll go back and re-say it so that he does feel like he's speaking right. And for whatever reason, like I have plenty of my own problems. For whatever reason, that's not one of the ones that got attached to me. And I don't know if that's because I've been a performer since an early age, the kid who jumps in front of everybody and does something dumb to make everybody laugh. I don't know if that has something to do with it, or if it's just aligned with my idea that all of us are imperfect, and that as long as I'm cool with that, as long as I'm cool with people seeing me as a whole person and not an automaton, I can't feel bad about missing a
Right.
word, or, because that's people do that. The smartest people in the world do that. I'm not Neil deGrasse Tyson, or like, I'm not going to berate myself for not having that, on the moment, Johnny on the spot kind of stuff. So do you think that there was something that led you to attach that belief to yourself? Like, if I can't, then I'm not.
No, I can't point to something. I mean, I know you talked earlier about peeing your pants. Events like that really tend to kind of define the rest of your life.
They can, for sure.
Because it's that context or that situation, you tend to avoid it for the rest of your life, and it develops your way of being. And I honestly, I can't point to something specific that I haven't been at an event. I've actually never had an issue talking in front of people. Right? I mean, I've done speeches in front of 3,000 people, 2,000 people, 1,500 people. But it was always a subject I mastered, right? Meaning, and when I say I mastered, I can talk to anybody about it because I knew my stuff, right? So it was part of what I do.
Right.
It's part of what I do, as opposed to, oh, look, you got to do that other thing now and get in front of a camera and do an interview with a journalist,
right?
So that's so it's not about.
So maybe it's not the speaking so much as the you feeling like you need to be in a place of mastery.
It's either mastery or ease of curation, because we were talking about curating, right?
Right.
Like in front of a journalist, I would have zero chance to curate anything. And that's in my mind. I cannot do it. So therefore, I don't want to be in that situation.
Right.
Whereas if I have a chance to curate it and a subject that I know well, then it's a no-brainer.
So right? when you're doing that, then you don't feel like those things are inauthentic?
No,
when you're speaking after having curated, or only in a curated sense, you don't feel like that is inauthentic?
Not at all.
Right? Because you feel like that desire for mastery is part of what makes you who you are?
It's because I only put myself in situations where I'm not saying I'm a master of anything, but whatever I master best, that didn't sound very good. Whatever I'm very good at, I tend to speak about.
Sure.
Right? Because I'm comfortable. So that's so I don't put myself in other situations, right? And that's why I struggle sometimes in these calls, right? I mean, when especially when a discussion gets into more the artsy fartsy side of things, like I really struggle because I can't. I feel that in inauthenticity, right? Yeah. So I struggle when I don't master the subject. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people do too, but yet they put themselves out there, right? And this is about mastering that, being able to be articulate on the spot and being able to find the words and being able to put yourself out there, not being afraid of losing words and hesitating and thinking for like what seems to be 30 seconds about the next words you're going to say. That's really that I relate to performance and being out there. And
so there's this guy, his name is Daniel Schmachtenberger. And I'll text you his name, Schmachtenberger. But he's a highly intelligent person. And if you ever do happen to watch an interview with him, he's incredibly articulate, like deeply articulate. He will always pause after somebody asks him a question. He does not feel the need to immediately rattle off an answer, any kind of answer, as long as it sounds good. He will stop and think for several seconds to make sure he's answering something the way he wants to. He does not feel the pressure, or if he does, he certainly doesn't show it, feel the pressure to just have a quick, here I go. And I think that is actually one of the things that makes him really compelling, is the confidence of, I know what I'm going to say. You can wait a minute for me to formulate this. And I think we might have gotten into a phase of online or public communication where if somebody speaks well, we also equate that with them speaking knowledgeably. And those two things are not the same.
That's right.
And
That I know. Right.
we
Yeah.
take that for granted, right? Like, and a lot of people, because we have short attention spans, we're moving quickly from one thing to another. And if somebody sounds like they know what they're saying, we will stop and listen and be like, oh, well, that's interesting. That's a well-spoken person. They must know the truth. And then we go about our business. I think it's probably in the long term, especially if the goal is to help people understand you, know you, care about you enough to invest in you, that maybe feeling confident in taking your time and waiting until you feel comfortable saying what you want to say, and recognizing that, like we were saying earlier, the wrong people will see that and go, and move on. But the right people will go, wait a minute, that's really interesting, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But it comes back to what we were saying earlier. I mean, this is my impression of myself. It doesn't mean the other people don't see me as an articulate person. I don't know. I'm just saying it's people. I have no issue connecting with people and with them having a mutually beneficial interaction with me. Right. I have no problem with that. It happens. And it's all good. I'm not, saying I'm out there hiding from people and afraid to answer and so on. Right. We're going to bring it back to the subject of performance. Am I comfortable putting on a performance? Absolutely not. Unless it is part of what I do. Right. It's part of my thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think changing the adjectives or the nouns related to people seeing you work would help to reframe or reconceptualize letting people in? So, like, example, if you call something a performance, that word has this innate feeling of something that is contrived in order to entertain or please or whatever.
Yeah.
If there were another word we could use to describe that, whether that is educate, or even if you were just to say relay information, right? Does that change how you feel about something? Like most of the things that I share, let's say just on TikTok, is just me blathering about something I find interesting or something I'm doing. And I don't approach that of I'm performing. I approach that of I'm connecting with whoever is going to feel like this is an interesting thing for them. If you can take the word performance out of it, even though technically that's kind of what we're doing, and reconceptualize that, do you think that makes a difference in how that would feel?
Yeah. You're not going to like my answer, but I never thought of this as performance. It's only because you brought up the subject today that I called it performance. Okay. So it's not, so no, changing the word doesn't matter because that word didn't exist before you mentioned it today. Yes, it exists. Gotcha. I know what it means, but you know what I mean, right? I wouldn't call that performance, but it did make me think, we are putting on a performance, and immediately my mind went to, what I do every day when I'm actually doing a photo shoot or walking the customer through the journey and the experience. Is that a performance as such? Well, absolutely it is, right? It is. And it's authentic, and it's me, and that's what they appreciate about it. Whereas the other aspect of it is the opposite of what I just said.
Well, I mean, here we've been doing this for what? Is it 2 years?
What's that?
How long have we been doing this now? Is it 2 years?
Since March 2020. or April 2020 or something like that. Yeah.
So we've been doing this for a long time.
3 years. Do
you feel like this is performative?
I feel I have an imposter syndrome being with you guys. Not you guys as much. I do. I am not comfortable being in this situation.
Bassam.
No, but I'm not. Yeah, I'm not asking for sympathy or anything.
No, I know. It just makes me sad to hear that, because you're right. We all perceive ourselves from the inside. Yeah. And for as long as I have known you, and as long as we've been having public conversations like this, I have always considered you incredibly articulate, well-spoken, somebody who, if they have something to say, it's going to be meaningful. I never expect to hear anything from you that is just like blathering in order to make word noises, right? If I'm going to hear something from you, I always expect it to be intelligent, even if it's not on a subject you're familiar with. Your observations, maybe from the outside of that, are still the observations of a critical thinking person. And so
But
I
but there's
guess
but
I
there's
wish,
the issue. But there's the issue. That's exactly the topic. The subject of our discussion is how do we perceive ourselves versus how
yeah.
others perceive us, right? And in a way, how we perceive ourselves, we've always talked about it. Actually drives you to be better, and that's why you're pretty good at what you do, because you always feel like you need to do more, prove yourself, and you get better and better and better. But that somehow that feeling never goes away, and that's what you know.
Mm,
Giving myself permission to feel some another way doesn't speak to me, doesn't mean anything to me. When you say,
right.
"Oh, give yourself permission to feel differently," well, I don't, right? And that's really no, but that's the question: is people maybe can easily do that, give themselves permission to feel differently. I don't know how to do that, because maybe that'll take that burden off. And but will it make me stagnate? Will it make me sit there and say, okay, I'm amazing now. I feel good about what I do. Therefore, I'm not going to get any better, or I'm not going to. I don't know. It's me.
It's interesting. It's always a little bit tricky to try to think your way through, because as you're like describing your experience, I'm trying to think my way through that and relate to it how I can, because obviously we're two people whose strengths tend to be maybe a little bit on opposite sides of the spectrum, even though I feel like I connect with you really well. But the my personality is definitely extremely extroverted, and probably areas that I have, like, I will very comfortably say I do not deserve to have confidence in all of the areas I have confidence in. If we are just talking purely about maybe
Yeah.
mastery of a skill set or something like that, I certainly go into many endeavors probably far more confident than what I should be. Um, and so as you're describing that, I'm trying to think of what that experience is like. And I don't think from my experience that it is ever actually easy to give yourself permission to do or to feel. I don't think that that's something you can flip on and off like a light switch. But I do think if it's something I care about enough, I'm willing to be uncomfortable until I'm not anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
making TikTok videos, I'm willing to be bad at. I mean, I should have given up a long time ago. My views tanked, everything just went to poo. Maybe 100 people were seeing, and I'm wondering, what am I doing this for? And I should have probably given up, but I just kept doing it because even though it felt like junk to put stuff out that nobody saw or cared about, I was willing to be uncomfortable long enough, because I feel like the ability to connect with people there, and I've already done it in some pretty spectacular ways that I'll be able to talk about soon, but the ability to do that, I feel like was worth my being uncomfortable and fighting through those interior thoughts of like, it's not going to work, nobody's seeing
Yeah.
it, you don't matter, like those kinds of things.
I guess it comes back to having that enough of a compelling reason to do it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Is
yeah, yeah.
there a need? Is there a need? Is there a necessity? Is there I don't know, a passion about something that drives you, or that becomes a secondary thing, as opposed to, uh, like I don't suffer from this all day long. By the way, I don't get up in the morning and say,
No, I,
"Hey, it's
no, well, I mean, most of your life
and
you don't have to do this kind of thing, right? Like this is
yeah, it's just that I look at some people and I say, I just wish I can do that more comfortably. I wish. I mean,
right.
I'm not resisting doing it. I'm not resisting the idea. I said that
Right.
earlier. I'd love to be able to do it, right? And I'm sure if I push myself, I'll do it. I just don't have a compelling enough reason right now.
And there's not really a need for it, is there? I mean, you're in a place where you're happy with where
Yeah,
things are going, and why?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
And if I can get, have halfway there by hiring somebody to help me with it, right? Like I'll give you a
yeah,
simple example. I'll do the work to do behind the scenes videos that somebody else can actually put out there, right? But I can't stand in front of the camera and talk to the camera and sound authentic to people enough to post it on a, right? Like you can
yeah,
take pictures of me working, You can ask me questions and I'll answer them, but I'm not going to carry that camera and talk to it and just post it out there. I can't.
I think that that's a great thing to know about yourself, though. And maybe, I mean, I know as we're coming toward the end of the hour, and I'm sure when we get Becca and Matt back with us, maybe next week as well, we'll be able to maybe have some of the other side of this conversation, which is maybe a little bit less internal and a little bit more about the kind of the pressures of the platform, right? Like the pressures of the marketing and that kind of stuff. But I think if we were to concede that some level of social media presence is a necessity in order to maintain the standard of your business or the amount of customers you get or whatever it is, even just the legitimacy, right? Because almost always now, if you hear about a business, you do expect them to be online in some capacity.
You have Instagram, you have this, are you on TikTok?
Right, exactly. Knowing that you're not the kind of person who is going to walk around holding a camera and conversating with a fake person in an authentic way. And then recognizing if that's important to you, okay, maybe this is something where my marketing budget should go a little bit each month so I can have somebody come in and do the videos for a couple of shoots and ask me questions and I'll talk to them and then they can cut those up and get whatever good bite-sized pieces are social media worthy and post them for me. Like even recognizing that, I think
exactly.
Could go,
yeah. So yes, there is a need for that, and I will benefit from that, right? And that's my way of doing it. That's how many other people do it too. But that's the right way for me to do it, rather than try something that I'm not comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think maybe one of the most important things that we can probably leave this conversation with is the fact that we are not all meant to be everything for everybody all the time. And it is okay for us to focus on where we're comfortable and what we're good at, and then optimize. That's the word I wanted earlier, Bassam.
Optimize.
Optimize.
Hey, I could have given you that one.
I know. It was just gone. Flew the coop and
optimize your business instead of making it efficient.
Yes. So we don't necessarily have to go wide, right? We can optimize instead and optimize the things that we are the best at and allow our platforms to.
Although, I'm not going to go there, but I was going to say, I can argue you can optimize also whether you're going wide or up and down, but
right.
Yes, but there's success can be had it's different business models is what it is, right?
Yes. So I mean, I'm experiencing that firsthand right now. And I know you probably heard me talk a little bit about this the last times, but the question of what type of business model do I want and why? Do I want to be an author who focuses all my attention on just getting 1 million people to read my books? Or do I want to focus my attention on building relationship with a readership who will always be there because they love my vision and they love the worlds I create? And my answer to that is I don't want to be invisible. I mean, I want to be invisible in that I don't want people showing up at my house, right? And things like that. But I do want that personal relationship. That connection means something to me. The fact that a reader feels like they can message me and be like, I am in love with this right now. This character is whatever's happening. And I'm like, yes, me too. Like I felt that way. That matters to me. So would I rather spend my energy trying to get as wide as possible, or would I rather spend my energy optimizing my ability to connect? And that's definitely where I would rather do it.
Right. And when I was listening to that episode and where I wanted to jump in, right, is that our only reference in general, unless we know so much about the industry that we actually know every nook and cranny of the industry, our only reference to that first one that you mentioned, which is, have millions, are the people that are in the public view, that 0.005, the Adels of the world and the J.K. Rowlings of the world, all these people that have made it. But that's not any different than our sports heroes and our presidents and our best CEOs in the world. And it's all the same. That's the only people we look at. If you went and look at all the authors out there, you'll probably find hundreds of thousands of people that are doing exactly what you want to do, but they don't have those millions of followers and they're making good livings. But we don't have access to those as much as we, our span of attention is not there to go look for these people. And right, all we look at is, hey, what's on TV, what's on TikTok, what's on the news, what's on the...
Well, and our
point of reference sucks.
It does.
right?
It does. But I mean, even just as a species of storytellers, we're keyed up to want to learn about the exceptional people, right? And like you said, that's 0.05 or less
But
percent.
the problem is you got to learn. We want there's a difference between trying to learn from them and trying
Right.
to be like them, or at
Right.
least, and it doesn't mean you can't be like them, right? It doesn't mean that. But again, it's that 0.0005, which means the work that goes with it and a combination of whatever we've discussed over the last 3 years, including luck and being there at the right time and having the right network, all of it, right?
Yeah.
It's like winning the lottery, right? It's the same concept. Well, actually, except there's work behind it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in
But
terms of odds, right? In terms of odds,
right.
it's the same thing, right?
Right. And I mean, I 100% agree. I think it would really behoove all of us to look a little more deeply into our professions, not just into who puts themselves forward as teachers, but into like, so as an author, you have traditionally published authors, you have independently published authors, small presses, you have also subscription models, you have people who write for free on places like their blogs or a website, you have people who are working now on Substack, you have people who are doing things like Radish, which is essentially it's a word that I just lost.
Optimize.
No, right. I know. Huh? No, it's where you release one thing at a time, a little bit of a time.
I wouldn't know.
No, the word is gone. But essentially they're releasing something like serialized. That's what it is. So they're releasing serialized fiction that just continues on and you show up and read it as there's new stuff. So there's a huge amount of options there. And I'm sure there's even more that I have not covered yet. But you only hear about the most successfully independently published authors and the most successfully traditionally published authors. And so you think that these are your measures of success. And I remember getting into my photography career, I would see the educators on Creative Live and I'd see the uber successful commercial photographers and think like, these are the two places you got to go if you want to be successful, and never thought about the fact that there were 5 million other different business plans and potentials out there, and that I could look into those to find out what suited me best. I thought I needed to change me to fit into one of those two things.
Exactly. And then you end up putting other parameters around it that relate to it. So you say, well, this type of photographer should be happy with $70,000 a year.
Right.
Well, no, there's this type of photographer that's making $2 million a year. They're just not that famous, that exception, that 0.005 or whatever. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, this was a good conversation. So I know we've had a few friends joining us today. Thanks for being here, y'all. I see your little, wait, you can't see them. I can see them. They're over here. I can see who is here with us, and I'm really grateful you all stayed around and hung out for this conversation. If you find this topic interesting and you want to chat about it a little more, please head over to the Facebook group, The Artist Forge. If you're not a member already, it is private, so you do have to request to join so we can keep our members safe. But let's continue having this conversation there, because I think a lot of artists experience this. I think that this struggle to decide how we want to show up publicly for our business is really, really common, and that the answers aren't always easy. As we saw, sometimes it's internal issues and how we see ourselves. Sometimes it is wondering if that is an authentic representation of what we want us and our business to be. There are really a lot of facets there, to this performance aspect of being an artistic business person. So head over there if you want to continue that conversation. We will be back next week on Monday at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. That is noon for the West Coast and 3 p.m. for the East Coast. Hopefully our other hosts will also be there with us at that time, so we can continue having a broader conversation. Don't forget, pretty soon I will be putting out the promo material, because Dennis Dunbar, who is a professional commercial high-end retoucher, you've probably seen his work on some of your favorite movie posters and advertisements, is going to be teaching our community about color grading. That's going to be a live 2-hour webinar that you can participate in and ask questions and learn things from him specifically during the second half of that webinar. So be looking out for that. And you do have to be a member to be part of that, but membership is really easy. You just request it and answer a couple of questions. So that is for our community, and we would love to have you come and join us if you are interested, not just about the skill sets that artists build, but the mindsets that help build artists. So I hope that you will come and join us. Until next time, have an incredible week. Go make something amazing. We will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.